Some guys like their cymbals level, other guys like their cymbals at such a steep angle that they're practically sideways. What factors determine this, and what angle should we keep our cymbals at? Hey everybody, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Let's head down to the kit. There are definitely a few factors that determine your cymbal angle, and you'll probably find as we talk through these that, oh, that's why I need to have my cymbals more level, or oh, that's why I can angle mine and it still works. There's also a special fifth factor that is sort of the less considered factor, but it's also important to think about too. So here we go. The first off, this is probably the simplest one, cymbal height. The higher you have your cymbals, generally the more tilted you're going to want them to be. But the lower they are, the more level they could be. For instance, here's this cymbal. This is an 18-inch crash, so it's roughly totally level. The main idea and the overarching concept here is that you want to hit the cymbal roughly at this angle. You don't want to hit it at this angle unless you want to hit the surface of it rather than the edge. You don't want to hit it at this angle either. You want to find that sweet spot where the shoulder of the stick is hitting just the very edge to really set the cymbal into motion to get a good, smooth, full cymbal sound. If you've got the cymbal low, you probably want to have it level so that you can make sure you're maintaining that angle. But the higher you go, well, that means the higher your stick's going to have to be, the higher your arm's going to have to be to maintain that angle. And so as you go higher, that's where you might want to start tilting it down. That really makes sense with this cymbal over here. If right now I've got it at my sweet spot, which is angled just a little bit, but it's also fairly low. I mean, this is only at, like, this is not even chest height for me. I don't like having super high cymbals. But if I'm going to raise this up, and I'm going to put it way up here, like let's say I need cymbals high to get them out of the range of the mics because I don't want the close mics picking them up. Well, at this point, I've got to raise my hand up to here and kind of start sticking out my elbow in order to get that angle right. That's not so great, so at this point, I'm going to tilt it down. Right here, I can probably play it pretty comfortably. We'll see. Yeah, I think that's perfect. If I were going to go this high with it, that's how I would want it angled. But if I go back down to roughly where I had it, which was probably about right here, that angle's still okay. I think that would be fine. But just because I want to avoid hitting the shoulder of the stick on the surface of the cymbal when I'm playing a crash, and because I'm not really riding on this crash much, I would rather level it out a little bit more. Factor number two, and this is a big one, which direction are you striking your cymbals from? So are you a downward cymbal striker? You're playing really loud and doing the monkey arms and going down? Or are you maybe playing a little bit more confined? Maybe you're playing a more jazz kind of style and you're closer to the drums and you're right here. In that case, you're probably reaching out more to the cymbal. So it's more like a reaching out and striking rather than a coming down and striking. Well, keeping in mind our overarching concept, if we want to maintain that angle, if you're coming down a bunch, you probably want to have your cymbals more level so you can come down like that. But if you're going out, well, now we're going to run into this, where we've got too steep of an angle. So if we're going out, well, there again, we want to steepen that angle a little bit. Maybe even more steep. It all depends on your taste, but at this point, I could be, let's say I'm playing something sort of light down here on the floor tom, I could reach out and strike it with less motion. And that way it's much more within access of right here. If I'm playing a bunch here and reaching out and crashing a whole lot, same idea over here. I could do the same with this cymbal. If I'm playing a lot on the snare and I want to have quick access to this, angle it down, bring it in a little bit closer so I can get to it quickly. This is where you really want to evaluate your playing and ask yourself these questions. Do I reach out to strike? Do I come down at them? Do I do a little of both? Do I need to find a medium? Because that's very possible also. Factor number three, also a big one that you've probably thought of, how loud am I playing? Am I hitting the cymbals really hard? Am I hitting the cymbals lightly? Most of the time with louder playing, you're doing more of that downward motion. So this really ties in with the previous point. If you're playing really loudly, you're probably coming down on the cymbals, and so that's where you might want them more level. If you're playing more quietly, you might be going out a little bit more. Although it could definitely depend on your technique and your taste here, where even if you're playing lightly, you might still come down. So it all depends on your playing style. This is something that you have to analyze for yourself. Number four, this is an interesting one, cymbal size. You may remember if you saw the video recently, a couple months ago, where I talked about how hard should you hit cymbals. We put a splash cymbal up here and compared hitting a splash with hitting a 20-inch ride with a 20-inch crash and compared some different cymbals. And the consensus was sort of that you can hit that splash however you want to. and it's not really, you're not gonna hurt the cymbal really if you're at too steep of an angle. You can really just reach out and hit it, and it's probably gonna be fine because the cymbal's so small and lightweight. Literally that cymbal might even weigh less than the sticks depending on which sticks you're using. So with small cymbals, it's not as crucial that you're hitting them at the right angle. Although you still should. You should still do that to get a good sound, but you're not gonna hurt the cymbal by going too steep or by hitting it in a different way, just because the cymbal absorbs so much of that motion by moving rapidly. But with larger cymbals, especially with large thin cymbals, you really gotta be careful with this. This is a 20-inch, fairly thin ride, but it's definitely got some weight to it. If this were a 24-inch ride and it were any thinner, I would definitely wanna be super careful about really digging in or hitting it too hard at too steep of an angle. It's important that that angle is right. And so you really do want to make sure you're maintaining that sweet spot angle to reduce the amount of force, unabsorbed force, on the edge of the cymbal. So in general, the bigger your cymbals are, the more you want to be careful about that, though you should keep that in mind with any cymbal. The smaller the cymbal, the more you can get away with less of a perfect angle. So now for that fifth extra point that's kind of a side note, but it's also important. Are you wanting to wash or not wash on your cymbals? And this applies more to a ride than to a crash, but we could also look at the vice versa of, are you wanting to ping or crash a crash cymbal? If we're wanting to ping a lot on this crash, well, we might want to have it angled steeper. But in the context of ride cymbals, let's say this is a jazz setup and I've got a ride here and I put another ride up here. Well, most likely I'm not gonna want to crash those rides a lot, although I might. That could be fine, that could be musical. If the sound of those rides crashed is great. But let's say I've got a ping ride, and that ping ride just sounds like an awful gong when I crash it, so I don't want to crash my ping ride. Then I might want to angle it steeper so that it's impossible for me to hit the edge, because I want to only play on the top. So you can also adjust your cymbal angle based on those musical decisions you know you're going to be making, and based on the cymbal itself and what its strengths and its weaknesses are. Say you've got a crash that you want to actually use as a ride, and you'd rather not crash it, you'd rather ping on it, angle it down a little more. If you want to ping more, wash less on your ride, angle it down. In my case, I like to wash a lot on this ride, and I like to be able to ping, wash, do whatever I want. I've got it here at this in-between spot so that I can comfortably reach and do whatever I need to. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope it gave you some good info. Be sure to share it and become a fellow non-glamorous subscriber if you haven't already. Thanks guys, and I will see you on the next video.